A teenager stands in a valley of dirt and crushed rock, holding a leather sling and 5 smooth stones pulled from a cold, dry riverbed, or cut down, to get to the throne God promised him. And they do read like a chaotic military history. The text says he strengthens himself in the Lord his God. He calls for the priest. He calls for the linen ephod. He stands in the ash, and he asks the divine voice for direction. The Amalekites are not just raiders stealing sheep. They are the final fire of the wilderness forge. They burn away the absolute last illusion of David's self-reliance. He rides out. He chases them down, and he recovers every single person. Not one child is missing. The wilderness has done its work. The boy with the sling is dead. The king is finally ready for the crown. He rules in Hebron. He takes Jerusalem. The kingdom expands. The borders solidify, and the ark is brought into the city with dancing and shouting. The outlaw is now the sovereign. The narrow place has opened up, but the crown does not end the attacks. It only changes the weapons. Because the most devastating enemy he will ever face does not come from Egypt, or Philistia, or the Amalekite desert. He comes from David's own dinner table. Empires do not collapse from the outside. They rot from the inside. Jerusalem is an impregnable fortress. The limestone walls are thick. The royal guard is elite. No foreign warlord can breach the city gates. But Absalom does not bring a battering ram. He brings a chariot. But if you look closer at the Hebrew words he used to cry out against them, at the precise, devastating moments these adversaries arrive, he brings 50 men to run before him. He stands in the morning dust of the city. He intercepts the angry. He kisses the hands of the frustrated. He systematically steals the loyalty of the nation. Treason is a slow, methodical poison. It feeds on unresolved grievances. It thrives in the vacuum of moral leadership. The rebellion of David's son is a masterclass in manipulation. Absalom weaponizes his father's undeniable failures. He weaponizes the king's toxic silence. David sits in an opulent cedar palace. He ignores the trauma of his abused daughter. He ignores the smoldering, justified rage of his son. The cost of that passive silence is complete exile. Look at the psychological asymmetry of this conflict. When an external enemy attacks, a kingdom unifies. Shields lock together. Lines are clearly drawn. But internal betrayal shatters the foundation of reality. You can sling a smooth stone at a screaming giant. You cannot sling a stone at your own child. You can dodge a spear from a paranoid monarch. You cannot dodge the consequences of your own private sins. Suddenly, the aging king is running again. He walks barefoot up the steep Mount of Olives. Tears fall directly into the dirt. Coarse dust covers his royal head. Former allies throw heavy stones at his retreating back. Violent curses echo across the Kidron Valley. This is not a war for territory. In the timeline of his life, you start to see something the military reading completely misses. The enemies were not a delay to his calling. It is the agonizing harvest of his own moral compromises. The tragedy of Absalom is not a political crisis. It is a devastating mirror. Goliath tested his raw, youthful courage. Saul tested his restraint and respect for authority. The Amalekites broke his stubborn, dangerous self-reliance. But Absalom breaks his heart. The ultimate enemy is his own flesh and blood. The opposing army is his own protected citizens. He cannot possibly celebrate the ultimate victory. Winning this brutal war means losing his beloved boy. He sits alone in the gate and weeps. The rebellion is eventually violently crushed. The rebellious son hangs by his hair in the branches of an oak tree. 3 bronze darts pierce his chest. The grieving king returns to his broken throne. He is older now. His bones ache in the winter cold. The nation is deeply, permanently scarred. You would think the forge has finally finished its work. You would think the aging king has learned every possible lesson. But the timeline holds one final, violent trial. A terrifying echo from the valley of his youth is waiting in the dark. The bronze spearhead weighs 300 shekels, almost 8 pounds of solid metal, heavy enough to cave in. A human chest through a shield even without a sharpened point. The man holding it is Ishbi-Benob. They were the forge that made him. The real question of this king's life isn't, how did he survive so many battles? It's this: a warrior wearing a brand new sword. And he is a direct descendant of the terrifying giants who used to command the valleys of Gath. David swings his weapon, but the strike is dangerously slow. His lungs burn fiercely for oxygen in the thick dust of the battlefield. His muscles shake with a profound exhaustion he has never experienced before. And his knees finally buckle into the dirt. The text in the 21st chapter of 2 Samuel states the reality with brutal, unsentimental clarity. David grows weary. He is no longer the teenager who sprinted down a limestone embankment with a leather sling to face the champion of the Philistines. He is an aging monarch with a scarred, battered body and a kingdom that has demanded a physical, bleeding toll for every single day of its existence. The giant raises the massive bronze spear, standing over the fallen king, fully intending to extinguish the legend of Israel right there in the dirt. But a shadow violently crosses the sun as Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, intercepts the strike. Abishai steps forcefully over the exhausted, breathless king and strikes the Philistine dead on the battlefield. The men who follow David pull him up from the ground, breathing heavily in the aftermath of the ambush, and they make a solemn, unbreakable vow to him right there in the dust. What kind of man is built in the dark to find the answer? You cannot just look at the public victories. They swear that he will never go out to battle with them again, declaring that the lamp of Israel must not be quenched. This is not the humiliating defeat of an aging warrior. It is the final, beautiful culmination of his leadership. When he faced Goliath in the valley of Elah, he stood entirely alone while the professional armies of Israel cowered in the trenches behind him. Now, decades later, when the giants return to finish the ancient war, the men he trained step in front of him to carry the weight. The text proceeds to list the aftermath. Sibbecai strikes down Saph. Elhanan strikes down the brother of Goliath. And his nephew, Jonathan, kills a massive giant who boasts 6 fingers on each hand. 4 towering descendants of Gath, all falling by the hands of David's loyal servants, the outlaws from the cave of Adullam, the bitter and distressed men who followed him through the starving years in the wilderness, have become giant slayers themselves. He has survived the valley, the suffocating cave, the white ash of Ziklag, and the treason of his own son, not because he was physically invincible, but because the relentless pressure systematically forged a resilient kingdom around him. The enemies have finally stopped coming, and the forge has grown completely cold. But to understand how David himself viewed this, you have to look at the crushing pressure. The making of Israel's greatest king was not a straight line of triumphs from the sheep pasture. Lifetime of relentless, suffocating attacks. You have to read the song he sings when the wars are finally over. Read the lyrics of an exhausted king. Look at the final manuscript of his life. 2 Samuel chapter 22 records it. Psalm 18 repeats it. 50 verses of pure, unvarnished theological reflection. He sings this song when the blood is finally dry. He sings it when the bronze spears stop flying. He sings it when the cedar palace is quiet. He does not celebrate his own tactical brilliance. He does not boast about his elite command structure. He talks about earthquakes. He talks about thick clouds. He talks about smoke pouring from the nostrils of God, coals of fire burning in the dark. He uses the language of a cosmic rescue. But the defining moment of the song happens in verse 19. David looks back at the caves, the betrayals, the ashes, the giants. He looks back at the suffocating pressure of his enemies. He remembers the Tsar, the tight place, the terrifying bottleneck, the corridor with absolutely no exits. And he names what God actually gave him. He writes, "He brought me out into a broad place." The Hebrew word is merchav. It is the exact geographical opposite of the narrow ravine. It means wide. It means expansive. It means a vast, limitless open pasture where your chest can finally expand and you can breathe. When you were trapped in a limestone cave, to the palace in Jerusalem. It was a brutal, relentless sequence of attacks that systematically stripped away everything he thought he knew about power. You pray for a dead king. When you are standing in white ashes, you pray for your stolen family. When your son takes the city, you pray for your stolen throne. You pray for the immediate removal of the immediate threat. You pray for the tension to finally snap. But God is not just removing threats. He is expanding the capacity of the man. The broad place is not a political empire. It is a resilient soul. David could not lead Israel from a narrow soul. A narrow soul panics under pressure. A narrow soul uses power to crush its opposition. A narrow soul believes its own manufactured myth. A narrow soul takes a dagger and kills a sleeping king in the dark. The enemies were the violent mechanism of expansion. The claustrophobia of the Tsar literally gave birth to the Murchav. Every adversary forced him to depend on a different, specific attribute of God. Goliath forced him to trust divine strength. Saul forced him to trust divine timing. The Amalekites forced him to trust divine provision. Absalom forced him to trust divine mercy. We fundamentally misunderstand the nature of our own battles. We view opposition as an interruption. We view betrayal as a tragic delay to our calling. We look at the people who stand against us, the circumstances that squeeze us, the failures that humiliate us, and we ask God to make it stop. We want the broad place without the narrow place, about loyalty, and about himself. He doesn't just fight foreign soldiers in open fields. He fights his father-in-law. He fights his own son. We want the heavy crown without the terrifying cave. We want the giant completely dead. But we absolutely refuse to bend down and pick up the rough stones in the dirt. But the architecture of the human heart requires the anvil, without the enemies. The king remains a shepherd. Without the pressure, the soul remains dangerously narrow. And that forces us to look at the battles we are fighting right now. A giant mocked the armies of God, and a teenager learned the true source of strength. A paranoid king threw spears in a cedar palace, and a fugitive learned the discipline of restraint. A hunted man held a dagger in the pitch black of a cave, and a future monarch learned to wait on divine timing. A raiding party burned Ziklag to white ash, and a broken leader learned to strengthen himself in the Lord. A rebellious son stole the hearts of the nation, and a weeping father learned the crushing weight of mercy. A new generation of towering giants returned to the dirt, and a weary king watched his trained men finish the ancient war. The suffocating claustrophobia of the narrow place closed in, and the God of heaven brought him out into a broad place. He fights the very citizens he bled to protect. Each enemy is precision engineered to crush a specific piece of his self-reliance. One forge. One king. But here's the part I keep coming back to. The white ash of Ziklag, the smell of roasted grain, and the sound of 600 men picking up heavy stones in the dirt. It is the moment when every single human crutch is brutally, violently kicked away. The king he served wants him dead. The nation he bled for has exiled him. His family is in chains. And now, the men who owe him, their very survival, are forming a circle to execute him. It is the ultimate Tsar. Absolute, terrifying isolation, because it is only there, in the total absence of human leverage, that he finally stops running and asks the divine voice for direction. If you are in a season where the walls are closing in, if the Tsar is squeezing the breath out of your lungs, and the opposition in your life feels less like a battle and more like a suffocation, do not assume the pressure means you have missed the promise. The narrow place is not a coffin. It is a birth canal. The resistance you are facing, the betrayal, the delay, the failure, the grief, is not a random tragedy. It is the anvil. God is not just trying to change your circumstances. He is trying to expand your soul. And may the God who meets his people in the dark caves of their running walk with you through yours and bring you out carrying. Each adversary forces him into a different kind of corner, tearing away a different layer of his pride. But before he can wear the crown, a resilience you could not have received any other way. If this opened something in you, subscribe. Leave a comment, even one word helps. Share this with someone who is fighting a battle in the dark right now. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. The air smells of sweat and bronze. On the other side of the valley, a man who is more weapon than human, before he can even understand the weight of the prophet's oil poured on his head. The pattern of his opposition has to be established, and it begins somewhere much quieter than a battlefield. To understand why David is always running, you have to look at where he is running to. It begins not with a giant spear, but with the very geography of the land itself. Look at a map of the ancient Near East. Israel is a tiny plant, vulnerable land bridge, a geographic choke point squeezed between the Mediterranean Sea and the vast, impassable Arabian Desert. To the south, the enduring power of Egypt. To the north, the rising hostility of Aram and Assyria. And directly on the coastal plain, holding a terrifying monopoly on iron-smithing technology, sit the Philistines. This is the geopolitical reality of David's world. It is a nation permanently on the defensive. The Israelites are pushed up into the central hill country, forced to fight bronze against iron, farming on rocky terraced slopes, while their enemies control the fertile valleys. Because of this context, we expect David's primary adversaries to be foreign military commanders. We expect border skirmishes and chariot charges. But the defining opposition of his early life happens internally. It happens in the Judean wilderness. This is the region stretching east from Hebron, plunging steeply down toward the dead, heavy waters of the Salt Sea. It is an alien, unforgiving landscape, screams, insults that echo off the limestone cliffs. You can hear the heavy clatter of a massive spear hitting a shield. And the boy does not run. Jagged limestone ravines, heat that warps the air and cracks the skin of your lips, caves that stretch deep into absolute pitch blackness, smelling of damp rock and ancient dust. When you are a fugitive in this terrain, every falling stone sounds like an alarm. And water is not a daily guarantee, it is an obsession. Most people read the chapters of David, running as an outlaw, and see a tragic delay. They see a young man who has already been anointed king, wasting the prime of his life, sleeping on dirt floors and scavenging meals with a ragtag militia of misfits. The wilderness is not a waiting room. It is an incubator. You cannot learn dependence on a throne. Power creates the illusion of self-sufficiency, insulating a leader from the consequences of his own arrogance. If David had marched straight from holding Goliath's severed head to sitting on the throne in Jerusalem, he would have been a monster. He would have been exactly like the kings of the surrounding nations, a warlord who believed his own myth. So the land itself becomes his adversary and his teacher. In the barrenness of the desert, his opposition shifts from a giant he can kill with a stone to a daily grind he can only endure. His enemy is hunger. His enemy is exposure. His enemy is the constant, suffocating anxiety of being hunted by the very government he bled to protect. He has to learn to lead a band of outcasts. This is the defining image of David, the underdog, the giant slayer. It is the story we tell children to teach them bravery against impossible odds. Debtors, the distressed, the bitter, before he is trusted to shepherd a kingdom. He has to learn where the water hides inside the rock. The harshness of the land was the first anvil, but the hammer was the man who wore the crown. And the greatest test of this entire wilderness season happens when the hunter suddenly becomes the prey, deep in the suffocating dark of a limestone cave. The air inside the cave at En-Gedi is heavy and wet. It smells of limestone and dust. Outside, the blinding desert sun beats down on 3,000 elite Israeli commandos. 3,000 spears hunting one fugitive. They scour the rocks of the wild goats, turning over every stone. Inside, shadows swallow the walls. David presses his back against the cold rock. His men hold their breath. Footsteps echo at the mouth of the cave. A silhouette blocks the light. King Saul walks in. Alone, he drops his armor. He lowers his robe. He is completely vulnerable in the dark, unaware that the ghost he has been hunting for months is standing less than 10 feet away. The men whisper in the pitch black. The message is urgent. The logic is flawless. This is the day. God has delivered him. Take the kingdom. A single thrust of a bronze dagger ends the running. A single strike stops the starvation. We frame his entire life by the enemies he fought. A giant in a valley. A paranoid king throwing spears in an opulent palace. A single movement transforms the outlaw into the monarch. The nightmare can end right here, right now, with one flick of the wrist. David steps forward. The blade is in his hand. He moves silently across the dirt. He reaches out. He cuts a corner off Saul's robe. And then he stops. His heart hammers against his ribs. The rough wool is in his palm. The text says his conscience violently strikes him. He steps back into the shadows, his hands shaking, suddenly horrified by what he almost did. Most people read this as a story of extreme mercy. A hero taking the high moral road against a villain who does not deserve it. But this is not an assassination opportunity. It is a theological trap. David realizes something in the dark that his men do not. If he kills the king to take the throne, he validates the king's methods. If he murders his way to power, he becomes the very tyrant he is hiding from. A crown seized by the sword must be defended by the sword. To strike the anointed king is to declare that God is too slow, too weak, or too absent to handle the transition of power himself. He is not fighting Saul. He is fighting the urge to become Saul. This is the genius of the Wilderness Forge. The enemy is not just external. The enemy is the temptation to manufacture his own deliverance. Every day, David is pressured to take control. Every day, he is tempted to force the promise. A raiding party that burns his village to ash and takes his family. A rebellious son stealing the throne in a dusty city square. The giant in the valley tested his courage, but the sleeping king in the cave tests his restraint. Saul leaves the cave. The 3,000 men march away. The physical threat evaporates into the desert heat, but the pressure does not stop. The walls are always closing in. The anxiety is constant. To understand the psychological weight of this exact kind of pressure, you have to look at the poetry David writes while he is running. You have to look at the vocabulary of his panic. And there is one specific Hebrew word he uses over and over again to describe his enemies, a word that changes exactly how you understand what he was fighting. Read the poetry David writes during these years in the wilderness, and you will notice a claustrophobic repetition. Look at Psalm 18, verse 6. David is writing retrospectively about the time when Saul and his other adversaries were hunting him across the Judean desert. The imagery he uses is terrifying. He says the cords of death encompass him. The torrents of destruction assail him. He is crying out for deliverance from the people who want to end his life. And he writes, "In my distress, I called to the Lord." The word our English Bibles translate as distress here, and often as enemy or adversary throughout his Psalms, is the Hebrew word tsar. We look at the sheer volume of people who tried to end this man, from his teenage years right up to his deathbed. We see the constant running. It appears over 100 times in the Old Testament. But the literal root of the word does not actually describe a person holding a weapon. The root noun describes a physical space. It means narrow. It means tight, restricted, a place where you are squeezed and cannot move. It is the anatomical root used for the birth canal, the agonizing bottleneck of entering the world. When the Israelites are backed up against the Red Sea, with Pharaoh's chariots closing in behind them and the water in front of them, that is a tizar. It is the suffocating panic of a corridor with no exits. That root changes everything about how you read his prayers. When David is crying out about his enemies, he is not just asking God to defeat foreign soldiers on a map. He is describing the psychological sensation of the walls closing in on his mind. The enemy is not just the man holding the spear. It is the claustrophobia of having no options left. If feeling trapped between the reality of your current circumstances and the promise you thought God gave you is something you recognize, you are exactly who this channel is for. Hit subscribe and leave a comment below. Because every week we go deeper into the text to find the exact language for those moments, the hiding in caves, the betrayal. And we think it is just the occupational hazard of wearing a crown in the ancient Near East. So the pressure squeezes him further south. He is pushed to the absolute edge of the map, forced to leave the territory of Israel altogether and seek asylum among the Philistines. The king, who was anointed to lead God's people, is now living as a mercenary for their greatest adversaries. He is completely compromised, playing a dangerous game of double-agent politics, just to keep his men fed and his family safe. But the tightest place, the ultimate Tsar, is not a limestone cave in En-Gedi or a mercenary camp in Philistia. The most devastating compression of his early life arrives when he returns from a patrol, walks over a familiar ridge in the Negev, and finds himself staring at the black smoke of his own ruined life. The smell hits them before they crest the hill: charred timber, roasted grain, the unmistakable metallic scent of a slaughtered herd. David and his 600 men walk into Ziklag, and there is no city left. Just white ash blowing in the hot Negev wind. The Amalekites have come from the deep south. They have taken the wives. They have taken the sons. They have taken the daughters. The homes are gone. The text says, "The men lift up their voices and weep until they have no more strength to weep." Picture the scene. 600 battle-hardened mercenaries. Just another war. Another rebellion. Same threat. Different day. Most people assume David's enemies were just obstacles. Lethal hurdles he had to jump over. Men who have survived starvation in the desert, and the spears of paranoid kings collapsing into the dirt, screaming into the ashes of their lives. They weep until their throats bleed. They weep until the desert wind dries the salt on their faces. And then, the grief curdles into rage. The wailing stops. The whispers start. Calloused hands reach down into the dirt. They pick up stones. You can hear the heavy rocks clacking together. In the silence of the smoke, the men are looking at David. The worst enemy of a leader is the grief of the people he failed to protect. The men he trained. The men he bled with. The men who owe him their survival are now forming a circle around him, ready to execute him in the ruins of the future he promised them. This is the ultimate Tsar, the tightest place of his entire life. The anointed king of Israel is standing in the ashes of a borrowed Philistine city, surrounded by his own army holding rocks. This is not a military defeat. It is a spiritual stripping. Every crutch is gone. Saul is dead or dying on a mountain far to the north. His Israelite identity is compromised. His family is in chains. His closest friends are ready to murder him. He is entirely, utterly alone. And in the ruins of Ziklag, David does something he has not done in chapters. He does not run to another cave. He does not negotiate with another warlord.